We break it all down and discuss the global charter that will be adopted at the end of this wonderful international summit. All right, so I'm going to be taking my seat very shortly and get the discussion underway with my panelists. But what I would like to do is, first of all, introduce these wonderful individuals to all of you. And remember, with this panel discussion, we want you to be a part of it. So we're going to be seated. We're going to get the discussion underway. And during certain intervals as well, I'll open it up to the floor for all of you as well to get involved. All right, so it's a great pleasure and honor to introduce my panelists. We'll start off with the gentleman over here, and I'll ask him to stand. Mr. Piara Power is the Executive Director of the FAIR Network. Now, the FAIR Network is an anti-discrimination and social inclusion body that works in football. Very good afternoon and welcome, Piara. A round of applause, please. We'd also like to introduce and welcome as part of the forum one of South Africa's most celebrated athletes, a former 800-meter world champion and record holder, Caster Semenya. And leading the African charge when it comes to NBA in basketball, we've got the Vice President and Managing Director of NBA Africa, and that is Mr. Amadou Gallo-Fall. A round of applause, please. Also very well known in the sports circles here in South Africa. He's the president of the Commonwealth Boxing Council, former president of Boxing South Africa, Dr. Peter Ngatane. And then we have an ultra-marathon athlete extraordinaire, world record holder. I mean, among some of his accolades, 9-time winner of the Comrades Marathon. That is Mr. Bruce Fordyce. And completing our panelists, celebrated football legend, former coach. He's also been bestowed with the honor, of course, of the Order of the British Empire honor. So a round of applause for Mr. John Barnes. Well, it certainly is such an honor to have distinguished panelists like these making, of course, their time available to be a part of the discussion this afternoon. And we're really zoning in on racism as well as discrimination in sport, talking about the defining issues surrounding this in the 21st century. Now, the reason why we're using sport as a catalyst to bring about the social change is because I think all of us certainly agree that sport can be used as a wonderful tool to make sure that we implement the social change in society. It's been used through the ages, that is sport as a platform to fight racial oppression and also different forms of discrimination. And you'll hear their stories. Many of our panelists have used their prowess and leadership in their respective fields to lead the charge in trying to eradicate discrimination as well as racism. And the reality, though, is that this continues in the 21st century. We'll set the scene by inviting Mr. Piara, first of all, just to give us an opening address, as it were. We know, Piara, that earlier this year you were part of the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination event in Geneva, which is driven by the United Nations. So you're very much a part of this conversation and a part of this fight.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carol. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm going to be a little bit the odd man out here with this handheld mic. It's great to be here, always great to be in South Africa, great to be in Joburg, and of course officially I think it's great to be involved in Global Watch. It's a great initiative. I've been talking to Tokyo about it for a few weeks, and his persuasive powers, I would say, made me come here, but it's a real pleasure to be here and understand what's going on and how we can drive this agenda forward. I sit with Tokyo on the FIFA Anti-Discrimination Task Force, and I think we have a whole series of avenues in which to take this agenda forward as we move on from the charter that's adopted later on. Now, I think there's a lot being said about the issues of racism and discrimination. I think we've heard a lot of insights from South Africans about the struggle of this country for equality, about the pain and the gain that individuals here have made over the decades. And it wouldn't be for me to come here from London to talk to South Africans about how we deal with racism and discrimination. So what I want to do is just maybe make some brief comments very quickly, because I don't want to add to the repetition of things that have already been said. And I think the first thing that struck me was that it's true that Madiba's now very famous comment about the power of sport, the way which can bring us together. This is the duality of sport. That on the one hand, we have the ability through football, athletics, rugby, participation in sport to bring people together. It does things that as Madiba told us, not many other physical, social, cultural activities can do. But at the same time, it can also divide us. It can divide us through issues of racism, through gender exclusion, through exclusion on the basis of your sexual orientation, and of course through nationalism. And I think that's my area of work is often focused on the way in which football in particular can be used as a force for bad. And I think that's something that we have to consider, some of the issues that we are considering here, that there's a duality to this, to the idea of sport. I want to cut to the chase, really, because Tokyo gave an excellent presentation yesterday of some of the issues of abuse. The presentation, in fact, I was going to ask you where he got some of those images, because we could do with putting some of those in our library. We know that there are fans out there, particularly in the mass spectator sports, who want to express their personal prejudices through their fandom of a club. And I think John, for example, will talk about that very articulately. John has been there in the front line in dealing with that. There are also coaches now. We seem to be going through a sort of, I suppose it's right to talk about it in terms of a mini virus, but we're going through a period where we have coaches and administrators who think it's okay to make abusive remarks. I think Donald Sterling's already been mentioned. Carlo Tavecchio, the Italian president, has been mentioned. I think the coach of FC Rostov in Russia. We have Malky Mackay, who was a Premier League manager, just been appointed again to a championship club in England. And now, today, overnight, his chairman, who has been talking about, disparagingly about people of colour, about Jews, about quote-unquote chinks. So for some reason, we have leading members of the sporting establishments who are using their positions to further racial hatred in particular. And I think that's something that we need to come to terms with. How do we make sure that these people are accountable for their actions, for the way in which they're using their positions in a negative way? And this goes beyond the fan issue. I think fans are easy to deal with. You sanction a club, you have education campaigns, but how do you deal with individuals who should know better, who are in a position of leadership and using that leadership in the wrong way? I think there's also a big issue, certainly from a European perspective, of the imbalance of power. I was very impressed by some of the analysis that our speakers and our colleagues in the previous session gave. And I picked up on a couple of things, in particular that Norman Benicio Gassa was talking about in terms of having a clear analysis about where racism comes from. And then the intersectionality of different struggles, of looking at gender exclusion alongside racial exclusion, looking at the issues that the LGBT community face as well. And I think all of these need to be taken as one, not to be politically correct, but to understand we have things in common and we need to use an analysis where we can tackle all of these discriminations as they perpetuate themselves in sport. Now, going back to this idea of exclusion at an institutional level, I think this is something that we debate quite a lot in the UK. It's been a subject for debate in the US and increasingly in countries like France and Germany and the Nordic countries. We have a great representation on the field of play of athletes from minority backgrounds, people like John who have surpassed themselves in the talent that they've shown. They can't be faulted in the way in which they've played. But we see an absolute absence of then coaches, managers and other leaders in football in particular, but I think it's the same in all sports. I see the same picture in rugby, I see the same picture in athletics. The athletes are black or from other minority groups, the leaders, the managers, the coaches, the people making the decisions are white. Now that's a disparity, I think, that is a big challenge for us and one that we have to address structurally. And I think it's something that when we get together again with Global Watch and put some actions together that we're going to really have to look at. Because this is something, there was a survey done in English football alone, and England is only one part of the UK, it's only one part of Europe and one part of the global picture. But out of 556 coaching positions in 92 professional clubs in England, only 19 of the individuals in coaching were from minority backgrounds. And there I'm talking about former players like John, we're talking about people from my background, the South Asian community, we're talking about Tunisians, Moroccans. Only 19 out of 552, 3.4%. That, I think, for me, showed the level of the challenges we face in coaching alone. Now, when we look at European governing bodies or the international governing bodies, FIFA included, UEFA included, we see an absence of decision makers from minority communities. So again, I reiterate, we have a lot of diversity on the field of play. We are dealing with issues that are related to fan racism, but we still have yet to come to grips with issues of institutional discrimination and exclusion. And it's the same with women. We've commissioned some research in conjunction with UEFA, and that research shows that in European football, less than 1% of the administrators are women. And that against the discourse we have of the need to develop women's football. Women's football in many parts of Europe is the fastest growing sport, certainly in the UK, certainly in places like the US. So these are some of the things I think I wanted to pick up on. Leadership is critical. If our leaders are not taking their responsibilities seriously and talking about how they can address issues of discrimination, then why should the guy on the street take it seriously? Why should the guy who's a fan take it seriously and paying his money? He just wants to see a match. He doesn't want to be concerned with some of the difficult issues that he might be seeing in terms of the analysis that we're making here. Let me move very quickly and finally to issues of prominence of the type that Tokyo reflected on yesterday. And we have a World Cup coming up in Russia. Now, Russia, the Russians are ordinary people. We share with Russians a common humanity, but they have a very big issue in terms of racism in sport, and a very big issue in terms of racism in football in particular. Some of the quotes, the negative quotes that we see about the Williams sisters, the characterization of the Williams sisters as somehow sort of subhuman, the challenge to their femininity. One of those comments came from the IOC member from Russia. So somebody who is the leader of his sport in the biggest country, physically the biggest country in the world, Russia, the country that will host the World Cup, a country where in terms of football, our focus is placed on for the next 3.5 or so years. So we have a big issue in that country, and it's not yet clear how we're going to deal with it. President Putin is the president, the chairman of the local organizing committee of Russia 2018, and yet we see no leadership from him. We see no leadership from Medvedev, the prime minister. It's absolutely getting to the point where people are beginning to tear their hands out, because we have people like Yaya Toure going to play for Man City at CSKA in Moscow and suffering racism. And he talks about it. Yaya Toure talks about the possibility of African teams withdrawing from the World Cup. Now, people might say that's just rhetoric. There's no way that the Ivory Coast, if they qualify for the 2018 World Cup, are going to say we're not going to play because Russia is a racist place. But nevertheless, it makes the point. We have one of the leading players in Europe making the point that if you can't deal with us, if the Russian public...
Okay. Yeah.
I take that as a hint, actually, because I'm going on a bit. But if the Russian public can't deal with us, black players, then why should we come here and play a World Cup? And I think that's part of the discourse. As I said, I look forward to working with Tokyo and others, learning some of the lessons that we can learn from South Africa, throwing a few other things into the pot, and seeing where we can take this global challenge going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Piara. Round of applause. And I think Piara raises some very poignant issues here, and especially when you talk about leaders that have to be proactive in taking the charge in this fight. I think I'll go to Amadou as well, because, obviously the NBA has also been in the media, and that's where we've seen an individual like the commissioner, for example, Mr. Adam Silver, one of the leaders when it comes to the organization, really taking a stance against racism, racist slurs. The NBA now has 101 international players representing 37 countries, so it's a very global sport. Tell us a little bit more about how you think that leaders in sport can also lead the charge in bringing about this change.
Thank you, Carol. I first wanted to take a minute here to just on behalf of our Commissioner Adam Silver, thank the Global Watch team here and Mr. Tokyo Sekwale for having us participate in this historic summit. I think, you were right. It all starts at the top. And I think that our commissioner has demonstrated tremendous leadership, and to show that at the NBA we have zero tolerance for any type of discrimination, whether it be gender or race, where our players are from all over the world. And as you noted, we have close to now over close to 30% of our players are from outside of the United States. So this makes for a very inclusive and progressive league, where what matters is really the talent and the makeup of your character. At the NBA, if you got game, we want you in our league, and we are going to make sure that you are successful. As a global brand, and also looking at the popularity and the visibility of our players, we understand that we have a responsibility to be leaders in really leading the conversations on social issues. This is why when incidents happen, we don't hide. We act swiftly and decisively to deal with that.
And John, I'm going to go to you. I mean, we're talking issues of racism and discrimination in the 21st century. I mean, you experienced firsthand racist abuse when you were still playing back in the 1980s. Has that changed? I mean, obviously we're talking about it more often, and we're seeing a lot of initiatives like Global Watch that are starting to spring up. But does more need to be done? The fact that we are still discussing these issues and we still have players that are experiencing what you experienced back in the 80s.
Absolutely, Carol. And I also played in the 90s, so don't want to make me too old. I didn't make 2000. I'm trying to feel young, and but yeah, obviously there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done. But racism isn't just about football. And Tokyo will tell you, racism is not just for 90 minutes. And racism isn't just verbal abuse of individuals. Piara made a point, and he mentioned, I don't remember the figures, of 19 positions being occupied out of a possible 500, 600, 1,000, whatever it is. You go to any institution, and I mentioned journalism, who are big drivers of this. How many black journalists are there in mainstream journalism? How many black captains of industry in all walks of life? And we cannot just separate football from life. Because before you're a football fan, before you're a football player, before you are a racist football fan, you are an individual, a human being who carries your sensibilities into any industry. So I empathize with FIFA and all of the administrators, because what can they do to eradicate racism? They can take care of their own house, they can implement strategies, pass laws, they can ban people. Now what that can do is, if I'm a racist, I keep my mouth shut. Is that getting rid of racism? So we have to differentiate between not wanting to hear it, which is what football can do in terms of the laws they pass, and getting rid of it. What is the solution to eradicating racism? And I'm glad to see those students over there, because that is the solution: education. Explaining to people why it's wrong to be racist. Not just say it's wrong because we're going to fine you or we're going to ban you. Now, what we have to do is we have to target the cause of racism, not the symptom. So the symptom of racism is Donald Sterling, Luis Suarez, John Terry, Malky Mackay. They are the symptoms. If you don't target the cause, those symptoms will keep coming back. There's a gentleman who spoke before talking about learned racism, which took 200, 300 years from the 17th, 18th century, when Linnaeus and Blumenbach categorized people. It took 200 years for us to learn racism. We can unlearn it much quicker, but we have to unlearn it. Yes, it's a two-pronged attack in terms of what the government, administrations can do, legislation can do, but it's also through education, explaining to people why it's wrong to be racist. Now, just to give you an example, we have to separate conscious racism and unconscious racism. Unfortunately, as much as we don't like to admit it, 99% of us are unconscious racist because of what we have been wrongly told about groups of people in terms of inferiority and superiority, because of what we have learned from an unconscious perspective. Conscious racists don't get caught because they're aware of their consciousness, their conscious racism, so they don't put themselves in a situation. So when you look at these from Luis Suarez, I don't blame them. I blame the environment they were brought up in to make them think that way. And that is what we have to target. And it's not just football's problem. So as a black ex-player, I'm now working in television, here obviously, but also a lot of unconscious racism goes on, which is the biggest problem in this fight against racism. Because what I will then be told by, I'm not going to mention any names because I don't even want to sue me, but I've been then told that by prominent managers, ex-managers, colleagues. They look at me and they think they're paying me a compliment by saying, we don't see you as being black. That's what they say to me. That's what they say to me. And I'm sure we've all heard it before. What that is saying, because I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, I don't even challenge them on it. But if I was to challenge them on it, I will say, well, if you don't see me as being black, what do you see me as being? You know what they will say? Normal. Is black not normal? And what is their perception of what black is that I'm not? Because I don't have dreadlocks and smoke marijuana? And that is what we have to change. We have to change the perception of what black is. What I have become in certain circumstances, and people in the public eye, Beyonce, all these people, we have been elevated out of blackness because we don't fit the black stereotype. So what has to happen is we have to change the perception of black. Don't change the perception of John Barnes. Change the perception of what black is. If you can walk down the street in Hillbrow and see a black man and not make a judgment on him based on his color, that is when we go a long way to get rid of racism. So we can have high-profile black people who can make it. I could become a manager of England and a manager of Chelsea, possibly. And will that change people's perception of the average black man in the street? No, it'll change their perception of me. So we have to stop elevating us out of blackness and then saying that, oh, I am not racist. I am not racist. And we've heard it before. I am not racist because I like Beyonce. I'm not racist because they've even married a black person. Or my best friend's black. Because you have elevated those people out of blackness. So from an intellectual point of view, that's what we have to do. We have to then look at black people. And until we're going to be intellectually considered as equal, we'll never be equal. So it's fine for us to have lots of basketball players, lots of footballers. The problem we have from a management point of view is that do they have the perception that we can actually think and be intellectual? This is what management is about. So we can have 11 black players playing for England. But until we change the perception of their capabilities, very much like women, we have to change the perception of a woman's capability to do certain jobs. So in many respects, it's not necessarily personal against women or against black. It's against a group, of which you have to be a woman, I have to be black, and the perception of that group's ability in certain industries. And unfortunately, in the higher echelons of all walks of society, we're not considered fit from an intellectual point of view.
If I may just add to that point, I think really something worth highlighting here, and I don't want to be sitting here and saying that everything is fine with our league, but I can guarantee you that going back to your point earlier, it starts at the base. You know, it's about education. It's about when our players first come into our league, how we empower them, how we empower them to understand that this is an environment that is inclusive. This is an environment that is about tolerance, and this is an environment where we cannot accept bigotry. I can tell you that we have over 41% of our management and coaches that are people of color. You know, we have our WNBA league that is one of the most high-profile women's professional sports where our ladies are world-class athletes, and they all go by the same principle that are guiding the NBA. I think it's about leadership, and also it's about going back to what the values of this league are. And the values are about respect. You know, we respect our individualities, but also our diversity. And this is really evident in everything we do. It's about protecting our game, protecting the access that the fans have to our game, and in order to do that, you cannot tolerate, you know, any nonsense in an arena.
And I think what's interesting as well, I mean, John speaks about social stereotypes and what is perceived to be accepted by society, and I think that also brings us to gender discrimination. I mean, it's happened to so many of our ambassadors. The likes of Serena Williams has experienced this, Martina Navratilova, and of course, Caster Semenya herself. And Caster, I mean, at a time, if we go back to 2009, one of the most difficult moments in your career, a time when we were supposed to be celebrating Caster for being a world champion, for setting a world record, but we saw, you know, the ugly side of discrimination rearing its head in terms of gender discrimination. Before 2009, had you experienced anything like that before, Caster?
Not at all. You know, when you grow up, you become a woman. You have ambitions. Then come competition, you compete with people, then you win against them. No complaints. Then come whereby you improve with a huge margin because of you train with professionals. You know, you move from rural to the urban. And then I was in a better facility when I moved to, HPC. Then I go to Africa Junior Champs. I run a well lead. I lead the seniors. I'm a junior. Then comes a question, a gender test. But then comes a man or a young boy, run faster. Then there are no questions. Before then, there were no questions. I raced against those young girls. I ran the World Youth, World Juniors. There were no questions. I won Commonwealth Youth Championships in India. There were no questions. But when I have to become a world champ, there's a question. I felt, betrayed, humiliated. In other way around, I wanted to express my feelings. Then I said, okay, I'm still an active athlete, so I should keep quiet and let the Elsa deal with it. So, but somehow, I think IOC should consider it, give a red card this gender testing thing, because to be honest, it's annoying now. Look at this girl from India, same age as I was, 18. She was not able to compete in the Commonwealth. It's truly hurting, so I think they should do something about it. Yep.
If I may get into what Custer has said and what the previous speakers have said, racism and discrimination is a societal problem. It impacts on the psyche and the psychology of the perpetrator and also on the recipient. Because the racist would have won if they had gone into your mind. Let's get to where we come from in South Africa. Verwoerd with apartheid. His main mission with apartheid was if he can subdue the blacks and make them nothing but just laborers, so that we cannot go any further. And he was a psychologist. And by then, he had realized that to defeat or to win anything, you have to go into the mind of the person. Now, Custer mentions the issue of he won all these races with no one complaining. Comes the world title, there's complaint. Because the world and even South Africa, we have this funny psychological aberration that says, if you win, I must find fault. Go to the Muhammad Ali, go to Tyson, you go to any of the top black sports persons. As they were growing up, building up to their pinnacle, there's no problem. It was when they are now at the level where, unfortunately, they have to compete against the superior race that the psyche thing kicks in. Now, if one has to go back to in our discussion with Custer and other, the issue of and exemplified by what happens in South Africa. A man starts a young boy as a boxer in Soweto or Mdantsane or someone. And somewhere along the line, this young man gets to the level of becoming a South African champion, a world champion. You have a similar young man in Boysens, a white man, of a similar performances and things. Come this thing called sponsorship. Under normal circumstances, a sponsor would like to associate his or her brand with something that's winning. But all the boxing trainers and even soccer trainers, the little ones, in the rural, in the areas and in the locations, those people struggle to get any form of sponsorship. I don't believe that anyone has a difficulty in any one of the managers being able to get sponsorship for their charges. But immediately when this happens, the normal things happen. They say, for you to be able to get more sponsorship and more recognition, come and train with a white trainer. That's what's happening in our local situation. Come and train in town. There's access of facility which we don't have. That on its own is plotted on a racist thing. Because the same man who cannot get a sponsorship, the same girl who cannot get the sponsorship being trained by a black person in the location, or Mkukwini, if one has to put it, gets across into town, trained by a white person, then all the sponsorship floods in. The ones that had initially refused, the same person when he was being trained by a different color. So on its own, the psyche then tends to come back to me, the athlete, that it means my black trainer who took me from nothing to at a level where I could be a world champion is not good enough. They've helped me destroy my perception of my peers on a single issue of sponsorship. So they always say, Castor, the tallest tree catches the wind.
Carol, please include me.
I was actually going to come to you next.
I hate being last.
I was going to come to you as well, Bruce, just to say that, I mean, in this fight to eradicate these issues, discrimination as a whole, we've already established that everyone has a role to play. In administrators, Dr. Peter Ngatane talking about, obviously, the sponsors, but the athletes themselves, the sporting heroes and heroines as well, they're the ones that are in the spotlight. So they've got a very big role to play. I mean, what comes to mind with you and your career, 1981, wearing that black armband, obviously to, speak out and to kind of demonstrate against apartheid?
Yes, well, I'll very briefly do that because I don't like talking about myself. But the 1981 Comrades was made part of the 20-year celebration of apartheid and nationalist government, and so those of us who thought we had a good chance of winning, many runners withdrew in protest, but those of us who thought we had a good chance of doing well showed our displeasure by wearing black armbands, so we were not fantastically popular with the crowds. I know what it's like to be hit by tomatoes and eggs. I was a very unhappy winner, but I understand from Tokyo that I was quite popular on Robben Island. But anyway, that was those years. Just a couple of observations from the other speakers. I noticed with my own children growing up that as very young children there was no racism. Their friends were their friends. In fact, they almost have to be taught to be racist. You have to learn it. And who are you going to learn it from? You're probably going to learn it from your leaders, your parents. And so that's the responsibility. And if I can give just a strange example of leadership, the day before yesterday, so I've got to just make a little aside here. Again, a broad generalization. I don't mean it anti-South African, but South Africans litter. We throw litter all over the place. I don't know what it is. We finish the drink, bang, the bottle goes down. We finish the pack of chips, bang. As a road runner, I can tell you there is not 1 square meter of one road in South Africa that is not deep in litter. You can do an archaeological dig on the history of beer cans, going back to the earliest designs at the side of a road. So it is one of my personal things. I loathe it. And the answer is now I'm creating a job for my brother or my sister by throwing litter down. Rubbish. We're wasting millions and millions and millions which could be used to do something useful. But that's aside. So as I drove around the corner into my suburb, there's a car stopped, bang, typical South African, open the door, wah, all your rubbish out the door, off you drive. But this guy came up against a traffic light. I came up alongside him and I admonished him, and I've always got to be careful. I saw that he was a little bit smaller than me, so that's okay. I'm not great on boxing. And I said, what are you doing? We can't do this. And this for me was the saddest answer of all. He said, the country is already corrupt. It's too late, Butch. And that's coming from, that's the leadership. So in that small way, in that way, we have to say, as leaders, how are we going to make a difference in all those things? And that's it. If I was a Ukrainian neo-Nazi, I might also wave a swastika around. When I'm watching a guy diving in the penalty box who's earning $500,000 a week or whatever, and to try and get a penalty. You know, that's just that example. If I happen to see my football leaders who may be not setting the greatest example, I would also, I'm angry, I'm earning a small salary, I've got an alcohol problem, it's, you know, whatever it might be, I would also be angry. And I think the greatest role of all now is we've got to look at leadership, and Piara touched on it. We've got to look at the leadership, because why should I care about racism when nobody else is caring about the other things? If it's corrupt on the one level, it's corrupt right through to racism, I think. And we have to try, and of course we're human beings and we can't all be perfect, but I think we have to make a difference in every single area that we can, and then it goes through to the other areas like racism. I just think that's important.
Yeah.
And we heard a lot of the symptoms of racism and a lot of the problems in racism. I think we have to focus on the solution, because I can tell you so many stories, but what is the point of me sitting up here telling you the bananas came on the field, you're going to feel bad, and how terrible it is? What is the solution? And that's what we have to focus on, the solution. Now, to focus on the solution, we have to look at the cause. It's like a disease, and the speaker before said that if we consider racism to be a disease, with a disease, you cannot treat a symptom. It's like a cold. It'll come back. We have to treat the cause. So we have to understand what the cause is. And I understand the cause. So first of all, we have to say racism is understandable. I don't understand people who say, I don't understand people who are racist. I completely understand racism because of the history of colonialism and slavery for the last 300 years has empowered a certain group of people over the others. And it continues to do so. From Livingstone came to Africa and discovered nothing, because whatever he discovered, a black man showed him where it was. I can tell you. And he didn't get the glory for that. What we have seen is that there are certain groups who, from an intellectual and moral point of view, and we continue to see it now, we continue to see what's going on around the world, whereby the intellectual and moral compass has been decided by a certain group of people over others. And that is what we have to challenge. So we can talk about problems we're having, but what is the solution? What we have learned for the last 200 years is a lie. From a scientific, genetical point of view in terms of race, and UNESCO passed a statement saying that race doesn't exist. That's a different subject. And because why should the gene that makes me black be different to the gene that makes somebody white? Why should Anton Ferdinand be a different race to John Terry? Anton Ferdinand's mother is white. Can he be white? So that's a whole different issue in terms of, but the most important thing is the characteristic that was put on certain races 200 years ago. And it was mentioned in one of the first speakers. So if you look at what the characteristics of black was from 200 years ago, from a psychological point of view, forget about physically black and white. The biggest disservice has been the intellectual characteristic that has been put on black people from 200 years ago, which continues to be spoken about. And that is what we have to challenge. And that comes through education. So instead of pointing fingers and say, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, I am not, because I wouldn't call somebody what Luis Suarez did. It absolves ourselves of responsibility to look at ourselves as normal people. Forget institutions, forget leaders, as normal people. Where do our values lie? Where do our sensibilities lie? And unfortunately, we don't see people as equal. We don't. So let's stop pretending that we do and have an open, honest discussion. But don't feel bad or don't feel guilty, because we can't help it. This is what we have been taught. So let us unlearn what we have all been taught about each other.
Carol, can I just say one word of comfort to John here? I am actually an archaeologist by training, and I taught archaeology at Wits University. And I can tell you that we have the DNA of one woman who is known as the mitochondrial Eve.
Absolutely.
The DNA of mitochondrial Eve, who lived in the Rift Valley 160,000 years ago. And her DNA is in every single one of us in this room and in every single human being on the planet. How's it, brother?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely. We are all African.
Yeah.
Human beings came out of Africa.
I think, I was just thinking, because, in the morning, I had a very good discussion with, I see some of the ladies are here from the school. And in my little understanding, I think if we have to get a solution, the solution is lying in some of those young people that we have here.
Okay. I know, Piara, you wanted to add yeah?
I think John's point about scientific racism, the damage that it has done, the enduring damage is absolutely correct, because scientific racism was invented by Western European colonialists to justify their colonies, justify the subjugation of other people. And we have to undo that. That's absolutely right. But one of the ways I think that we can undo that is the way in which South Africa has done that, is to say, we can run things as well. We can govern ourselves. And I think it's exactly the same in sport. If we have 25 to 30% of athletes in football that are black, and yet we have 3.6% that are coaches, there's an obvious disparity there, particularly because the coaches come usually as former players. So we can, in the same way, I was having a good discussion last night with some colleagues. Post-independence South Africa, the planes flew very successfully. People thought that once the handover took place, that things like planes would stop to fly because there wasn't the expertise within the majority population to run the planes, to run the industry, to produce the engineers, the pilots, the cabin crew. That didn't happen. Everything went well. The safety record was maintained, probably exceeded. And so I think in some ways, as groups, we need to understand the power that we have and look for a sharing of power. And to say, give us our due, give us our respect, and in that way we can show you that we are equals. Because I think if we wait to educate every single racist on the earth, everybody who has a stereotype about somebody else, then we may well be waiting for another 150 years.
Well, trying to increase the opportunities has also been part of the fight. John, you wanted to add to that?
I just wanted to say, for me, the biggest problem, I've been to Knesset in Israel, I've been to Palestine, I've been to Oxford, Cambridge universities, I speak a lot on the issue on racism. And I always say the biggest problem with racism is not the conscious racists. We know who they are. We can avoid them. We cannot have dealings with them. We can do whatever we will with them. The biggest problem is the unconscious racists, of which we all are one, me included. And I'll tell you why I am, because I've been wrongly told, not just about myself, but other groups of people from a positive and a negative point of view, and that has impacted on my life in terms of the perception I have of people. And we are the problem, the unconscious racist. We are absolutely the problem. Because, and it is everywhere. I'll use Jose Mourinho. I'll never accuse Jose Mourinho of being more racist than anybody else. I'm not even accusing him of being a racist. But this is the unconscious racism that we have to deal with. Jose Mourinho has said that if you're good enough to be a coach, you'll be a coach. He obviously doesn't know that black coaches or black players who want to be coaches haven't been given the opportunity. He just assumes that if you're good enough, you'll be given the opportunity because he doesn't have to think about racism as the majority of us don't. Now, is he actually saying that black players then are not good enough? Because by saying that if you're good enough, you'll be a coach, the fact that there are only two means that black people aren't good enough to be coaches. He hasn't even thought about that. Secondly, the whole idea, once again, an unconscious racist statement or question, of which we all ask without thinking about it, is as to whether black men can make good coaches. That is a racist statement, unconsciously, because people don't understand. And I'll tell you why. Because it presupposes that a black man cannot be a good coach because of the color of his skin. Now, for me, that's as stupid as saying, can pigs fly? Because is there a possibility that a black man cannot be a coach because he's black? Is that a possibility? Anyone here ask me that question? Of course not. So why ask the question? Because it is an unconscious racist question. And we all have that. And until we get rid of this unconscious racism that we all have in terms of our questioning the capabilities of an average black man. Forget about Obama and me and whoever else, Beyonce, I'm not considering myself to be like Obama. But forget about that until we consider the average black person, and we look at that average black person and don't pass a judgment on his capabilities based on the skin. We can pass it based on the judgment of his education as to whether all those other issues, then we will never be equal. So we can have 11 black players. We can have black people. We can even elevate certain people out of blackness to become the president of the United States. That's not going to change a thing.
And caution, racism is not only white against blacks. It also is black against white and against other nationalities, Indian, Hispanics, and other things.
I'm going to be opening it up to the floor. We've got roving microphones, so you can just raise your hand to be a part of the discussion at this stage. There's a hand right up front.
Carol, thanks very much. My name is Catherine.
Okay, just hold on. Let's make sure that your microphone is on. Okay, try again.
Go ahead, I think we can hear you now.
Give it a bang.
Shout.
I'll repeat your, yeah. Go ahead, I'll repeat your question.
I'd firstly like to say congratulations.
It's gone.
For overcoming the challenges that she has faced, because she really is the champion for all of us women in sport. What she has gone through, nobody should go through. And the fact that she has come out of it and she's still chasing that. She tells me she's got 8 world championships forever. And I think that the media needs to start reporting more positively on women in sport and stop making us look like victims. So the results start speaking for themselves. And we have numerous women in sport here, including that Toy, Minnie Mteshwa, Tamsi Radele, Natasha Chickless. These are all icons of sport in South Africa. Let's hear more positive stories.
All right, so a very important point there that Kaz Naidoo is pointing out, saying the members of the media also have a big role to play in terms of highlighting what our female sporting icons are doing. And she's also congratulating Makasta for, still being out here, still being a great ambassador, still chasing those records even after her ordeal. John, you wanted to?
Oh, no, I'm just pointing out people with their hands up.
Okay, another comment, question? Yep.
Hey, there are people there.
At the back there.
Okay. There are people on that side.
They should give it to the person
All right, it's
who's
the microphone
nearest.
right at the back.
Whoever's nearest, which he has the
Is
mic.
it working?
We have another mic this side.
There's so many people.
And there are many people.
All right, we're just having an issue with the mics. Okay.
Take PR's mic.
Yeah?
That side.
No. All right.
Take
Use
yours.
this microphone. Here you go.
I use this thing all the time, so check your mic right is free. Am I clear now?
Go ahead.
All right.
Yes, you are.
Who's speaking? Okay, I will start by introducing myself as an. Okay.
Feedback.
Go ahead.
Talk.
Okay, I'll firstly introduce myself. Hello?
Yes, go ahead, sir. At the back. We'll start with you. Yep. Yes.
Okay, I'll start introducing myself as an ex-political prisoner. I must say something about this subject. Number one, we're dealing with a very complex subject today. And when we talk about racism, there are a lot of things that we need to consider. Number one, I will strongly agree with John Barnes because he said exactly some of the points that I wanted to comment about. Our gathering here is concentrating more on consequences instead of that is causes, of which I believe that we should use these consequences as references, but concentrating on the causes and implementation. As I have said before, that I think we need time to have commissions, especially on these subjects. Commissions will come with a lot that is of solutions when it comes to racism. Please, let's concentrate much on causes and the implementation part of it as a way forward.
All right, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, sir, you've got the microphone? Yeah.
Yeah, mine is very short. Dr. Ngatani says the young people have the solution. My question is, what happens when they go home? That's my question.
Your answer, Brasip, that's, he didn't introduce himself. That's Sipho Mabuse. Now, he asked a question of what happens at home. If you remember, you are from the same generation of 76 and before. There was a resistance at home when we came with all political and changes that's supposed to happen. Our parents rightfully were trying to protect us by being a barrier around us. But ultimately, those parents came around and become the best and the biggest supporters of the struggle at that time. So I'm saying this on the basis that these young people, with the knowledge being anti-racism, they will find it difficult to the already ingrained racism that sometimes permeates, as Ban says, unconsciously at home. But with the persistence and with the force that they can ensure that at the end of the day, it will happen. Because I've just given you an example that the most difficult thing, we had to, the youth had to turn the parents around to see the way. So is the situation. Because as I said, in the morning when I had a very strong religious discussion with some of these students from the school, the resolve with which they believe in certain things. And if they take the same resolve home, I think we have a future.
And hence us having a lot of them here with us. Just a quick comment.
It's not just about what happens at home, it's what happens in the wider media. If you look at what we actually see all around us, you talk about kids being grown up. Who are they influenced by? I'll just use two little examples here. You go and watch Aladdin, the DVD of Aladdin. You take the kids to see Aladdin. Aladdin is white with an American accent. The evil Jafar looks like Saddam Hussein. You may say that that's a small thing, but then if you look at all of the things that we see in the media in terms of what our idea of morality and our idea of what beauty is, morality is. So it's not just about what you learn at home, it's what we see all around us every single day. You look at, and that for me is the biggest problem. That subliminally gives messages as to what beauty is, as to what intellect is, and that is the most important thing, not just what you learn at home. So I think society, of which we all are a part of, has a responsibility to reflect particularly history in the correct way. Because I've watched Jesus Christ, the film, and he wasn't blonde hair with blue eyes, but that's what we see. So we empower a certain group of people over others, generally speaking anyway, and that's what we have to change.
We'll take two more comments. Yeah, the lovely lady here up front.
Thank you very much, Carol. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tandega Mokharani. I'm from the University of Pretoria. And I'm very glad that we are touching now on the subject of what about the youth? What happens when they go home? Whereas my question, as well as my solution, is where is the youth? The youth has been brought here as spectators. We are not directly involved within these quarrels and solutions. We have been brought in to listen and to hear, but not to be directly involved. This is something that I had spoken to Mr. Sekwale about briefly yesterday. And Mr. Sekwale, as I said yesterday, that we will start the Global Youth Watch. We are not asking may we will start it. As well as to everybody who is here, especially the secondary schools that are here, you guys need to understand that you need to leave here with everything that you have learned and everything that you have heard. Go home and begin the movement. Nobody's going to give you the platform or the opportunity. Because what happens is, we do not know black and white when you are in your primary and secondary stages. I did not know that until I got into my tertiary level. That's when I knew that people who were even my friends now turn away from me on a secondary level or a tertiary level, that is. So we need to instill these penalties, as have been put, within our sports fields from the children. As a mother would reprimand and punish a child when they do wrong as a little child, we need to implement these penalties and sanctions within our children from the sport fields when they are 5, 6, 7, 10 years old. That's how we will then unlearn everything in our unconscious racism that has been put forth. Thank you very much.
All right, just a final one on this side. If you can give your microphone to the gentleman at the back there.
Hello, Carol. Sorry, I've got a mic over here.
Oh, okay. Well, just quickly, we'll get from the gentleman and then we'll go that side.
Thank you very much. My name is Ivan Pepedire. I'm a former professional footballer. I was touched when I heard Dr. Peter Gnatani speaks about sponsorship. There's a propensity here in the country, especially in South Africa, when a brand is not doing well or is against a person who is sponsored by that same brand, we all go for a boycott. But to me, I don't think that is enough. I'm happy that there is a global watch here. And then the question for me is, what else can we do? How can we punish the brand that really punishes, that penalizes a person who speaks out against racism? I think I get an answer from John Barnes.
Well, first of all, it's not about, and once again, institutions, from a political point of view, we can punish, we can fine, we can ban. We have to change the perception. That is not going to change the face of racism. That will do. You will then force them to maybe hire a black coach, possibly. But the solution, to the overriding solution to the biggest problem, is to change the perception of that particular sponsor as to why he believes that a white coach would, from a sponsorship point of view, would be better than a black coach. Not forget results. Now, how do we change that perception? And that perception is to change the perception of what they consider black to be. Because unfortunately, the perception that we all have of black, the majority of us have of black, is negative. That's what it is. I'm not talking about a black superstar individual. I'm talking about black generally. And until we change that perception of what black is, you will continue to have situations like that. So yes, we can punish them, we can fine them, we can ban them. But is that the solution to getting rid of racism? Long term, no.
I'll go back to the young lady, and she made a very, very good point here, because when we talk about solution, you focus on the youth. You know, across Africa, in all of our grassroots development, whether it's the Basketball Without Borders program that we do every year for the past 13 years, bringing about 100 kids from over 35 countries across Africa, or we have a program called Live, Learn and Play that we partner with USAID in Senegal, and another one in Nigeria called Power Forward. It's really about inculcating the intrinsic values of sport into these young people across gender at a very early age. And you'll be surprised that they will grow up with this. They are going to be leaders. And this is really about continuing to focus on the power of sport as the greatest equalizer. And this is where we do at our league. We are egalitarian. What matters is, you know, you're skilled and also your character. And we live up to that.
All right, thank you, Amadou. Got another comment here?
Hi, my name is Mampo Editoteti. I'm actually wearing two hats. One is I'm a Sports for Social Change development practitioner, and also a South African Nationals Fast 5 netball player. And I just want to start by saying we're not having 3 World Cups next year, we're having 4. Netball is also in a World Cup next year. So please, let's also speak about female sports. And I want to also congratulate Cass. I mean, she's in G Sport, and I mean, she's having awards end of the week that recognizes women in sport only. And I'm hoping that's going to get the same platform as all the other male sports in this country that are getting. Okay, so coming on solutions, I've got a few solutions, and one of them is from a research base that I've looked at is, as coaching federations, our coaching manuals focus a lot on technical aspects of coaching. We don't teach diversity management and holistic teaching of coaches in this country. So we should start implementing diversity management parts within our coaching of coaches, if I'm making sense. Therefore, we prepare coaches, because remember, we came from apartheid, where only the old regime of coaches were coached how to coach. Now they have to coach black players. They don't know how to coach about black culture. I'll give you one example. One of our players, most of our players black players don't look at coaches in the faces, because in our culture we're taught not to look at an adult in the face. So you look down when you speak to them. Now our white coaches are actually screaming at black players and saying you're disrespectful, because in English culture you have to look at somebody in the eyes when you speak to them. And it's small things like this when you look on a broadest perspective. Cultural and diversity management is a very important topic that we haven't covered in the sports fraternity, and we need to start looking at that. And lastly, brands and media have such a powerful force. They actually at this point in time own sports. So if our brands can start funding more of female sports, because at the end of the day, if Global Watch decided to say we're going to take netball on for the next 10 years, they will make it work. They will create a whole business empire like the NBA did around that sport. But they should really start looking at it as from a perspective of, we want to develop women so that female athletes can also have a revenue when they get older, because you feed a woman, you feed a whole nation. So can we also start looking at the female perspective? We've heard everything else, but we're still not speaking enough about gender in sport. We looked at it from a political perspective, but I don't want to see another national player. I saw a basketball player the other day, ex-national basketball player, packing plastics at a shopping mall. This is one of the best athletes I've ever seen in my life. What are we doing for that? What is the media and what is the corporate sector doing for that? And if we can look at more of that kind of initiative, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all of your comments. Yeah, we're going to be wrapping it.
Carol, I'd just like to say, brands go with public opinion. All of these brands, Pepsi, whoever you want to say, they want to sell Pepsi-Cola. So they go with public opinion. And if public opinion says that we prefer this, they will go with that. So what we have to do is we have to change public opinion. Now, speaking to that young lady there, One Direction. I know you're being filmed. I don't think they're particularly good. Everybody loves them because they have been created. Could five young black boys from Soweto with more talent do what One Direction did? No, they couldn't, because public opinion says that because they look the way they do, they are the color they are the ones who are more marketable. That's what we have to challenge. When we're talking about talent, talent alone is not enough. That is why, I know this is a sporting charter, but I've been speaking not against it, because I understand how important sport is. I do not particularly like the idea of black sporting role models, because we're supposed to be able to box and run and fight. We're good athletes. Can we think? That's why we need more black intellectual role models. So for sport to drive this, fair enough. We need more black doctors, more black lawyers, more black intellectuals, because we will be accepted as maybe even superior on the athletics field, in the boxing arena, but in terms of our ability to think, that's where we need more intellectual role models.
So we make sure we align education and sports. You know, they don't, you know, one doesn't exclude the other necessarily. You know, in our league, and again, I hate to be, you know, using our example, people go to school. You start playing in high school, you're good enough, you move to college. Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, these were the greatest of all time. They retired, they are unbelievable business people. They're all educated. I think that's where we have to start. We've got to make sure that at grassroots level, young people understand that you could be great at sports, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't be great at education also.
But unfortunately, I think if you're black, we should do the other way. We have to stop telling our black kids you can be a footballer, you can be a boxer, you can be a sportsman. Yeah. We have to stop doing that. We have to start saying to them that you can be an intellectual. Yeah. Because white kids don't need that, because they have their role models who are the prime ministers and the captains of industry. The more we keep pushing, you can be a boxer, you can be a footballer, the more we keep pushing that, the harder it will become for us.
All right, we have to wrap this panel discussion, because we're going to get very proactive in our next panel discussion. We've got a final comment at the back from one of our young leaders. Go ahead, sir.
I greet you all in the house in the name of Jesus. My name is Manga. My name is Manga from Butumelong. What I can say today is that, let me quote from the Bible. The Bible says, my people are lost because they are lack of knowledge. I like the statement that says, it is important to say I came here and I shall stand here as South African. When you see me, you see a human being like everyone, because black and white, there's no difference between black and white. And there's no difference between male and female. I say no to racism. As the Bible is saying, as God does not judge with a human, the Bible is saying God does not judge as human being judges. A human being judges according to the out appearance, but God judges according to the heart. As we are people, we must not judge according to the out appearance. And I believe that where there is no unity, there is no peace but destruction. As the Bible says, the kingdom that divides itself, it shall not stand. And if... Okay.
Thank you so much, Smanga. All right. So we're going to wrap this panel discussion, because in our next panel discussion, there'll be another opportunity for you to get interactive and get involved. I want final comments from our panelists here. We'll start off with you, Piara.
Well, I don't think we can solve the problems that we have in sport or in society in one afternoon. And that's the key thing. Yeah. We take on board everything that's been said. We take our different viewpoints, and let's move forward. In the end, for me, it's about holding those that have power to account, and then building in education around that. Of course, we can't move anywhere without education, but at the same time, we can't wait for educational measures to kick in, because we'll be waiting a long time.
And from you, Custer, I mean, you're looking at your experience. You've moved forward now. You know, just taking a look at some of the examples, what can be done better in the future as well, as we try and eradicate discrimination?
I think I'll speak in the point of view, you know, in youth side, you know. I think youth should believe in themselves, because they mustn't concentrate more on what people say. Like me, they say I'm bold, I'm muscular, but that thing doesn't distract me from running, you know. Yes, I might be tested, but it doesn't disturb, you know. They must just focus on what they're doing. Actually, also education must come first. We don't want to see them on the street, you know, picking up the plastics, and as they said. So yeah, focus, guys.
Thank you so much, Kester. Amadou?
Yes, for me, it's about really having core values and being consistent and really sticking to them. The example she gave about a former player who's now packing groceries, those things have happened, you know, in America also. But I think it is important that we understand the role of sports in society. We have to start making it part of the school curriculum and not just look at it as recreation. I think it teaches young people, you know, unbelievable values like teamwork, integrity, you know, discipline, and all those are values that are going to teach these young people to live in community, to really understand that as on the basketball court, you are dependent on your teammates, because in order for the ball to get scored, somebody had rebounded it, somebody had passed it, and then somebody shoots. So teamwork, the right values, and having young people growing with their love of sports to understand that, you know, it's really bigger than what's happening on the court. In our league, that's what we do. The same standard by which we uphold our players, we hold our coaches, our team officials, and all administrators in the league. It's about consistency.
All right, thank you so much. Dr. Natane?
Thank you. I think, firstly, on behalf of, even though my chairman from Boxing South Africa is here, and I think we've made great stride that we have a woman chairperson for Boxing South Africa. She's there. And on behalf of the African Boxing Union, of which I'm the vice president, and the chairmanship is in Tunisia, and on behalf of the Commonwealth Boxing Council, and on behalf of the World Boxing Council, I've received a message of support for this process. And as Pierre says, it's not a one-day flip. It's a process that we have to engage and make it go on. Mr. Sekwale's foundation, Nelson Mandela Foundation, and Doha Foundation have started the process. It's left for us to keep it forward and make sure that it attains its rightful goals. And as I say, our future is in our youth, and I strongly believe they'll help us along.
Thank you. Bruce?
I just want to start off by saying to John, thank you very much for your input, because you've made me think a lot more deeply about these things. Thank you very much for that. And then just maybe I might be anticipating the next panel discussion, but my deepest fear with these things is we are fantastic in South Africa at having meetings and think tanks and white papers and all that sort of thing. Action. And I know we've got the barometer. I just hope, to use a sporting and athletics analogy, that we don't drop the baton now. You know, let's keep it going. We've had we haven't finished, but we have so far had a wonderful 2 days. It would be a pity if after all this, all that there was discussion, and we didn't move on this, that in a year's time, in 5 years' time, we can say, back then, remember, that's when we started the initiative, that's when the gun went, and we're still passing the baton along. Thank you.
John?
Well, I suppose in the last 4 years, I've been embarking on a campaign to try and find a solution, rather than focusing on the problem, focusing on the issues, find a solution. And it's a two-pronged attack as far as I'm concerned. You look at administrations, institutions, government, to implement, from a legal perspective, a zero tolerance against racism, which we've been hearing about for a very long time, since I was playing football, and that's all that can do. From the educational point of view, what we have to do is we have to change people's perceptions. And why I say that is because we've heard a lot now about racism. That's the problem. But of course, we've heard from some women saying sexism is the problem, and then gender, sexual orientation could be a problem. It's all discrimination. And the solution behind that is to then find out where the discrimination comes from and understand it, because of what we have been wrongly told about women, about blacks, about people of different nation. So it's all discrimination which should be lumped into one and say, let us change the perception that we all have. Forget about institutions, look at us from an individual perspective. Look within yourself to say, what is the perception I have of that person based on his color or her sexuality or his sexuality, and then say, let us change our own perception and our own perspectives on individuals. And when we do that individually, it will then trickle up into the institutions. It can't trickle down, it's got to trickle up.
Round of applause for all of our panelists, ladies and gents. We are, yep. We have to wrap things. I don't know where's that microphone? So we'll be giving you an opportunity very shortly, but we just need to wrap this session. As we said, we're taking the next step forward now, because in our next discussion, we are going to be focusing on this global charter. My colleague Peter Ndoro is standing by at 2 o'clock exactly. So in 15 minutes time at 2 o'clock, our next panel discussion will get underway. And of course, we'll be hearing from all of you as well. Thank you so much for being a part of this one. And a big thank you as well to our panelists. Oh, okay. Just yeah. Microphone. Yeah, Peter.
Right. Okay. So we can't wait until 2 o'clock because we don't have time. So I'm just going to get this lot off. Thank you. Get off. Get off. Get off. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. A big hand, ladies and gentlemen, for our panelists who've set up our discussion. Thank you. Great. Fantastic. What I will do, though, because I know that you're all sitting in economy class seats at the moment, do you want to just stand up and stretch? Oh, there you go. Stretch, stretch, stretch. Kick your legs. Don't kick the person next to you. So just stretch a little bit, let the blood flow. And once you feel like you've got your body back, let's sit down and start the session, because it's a very important time. We don't have a lot of time, and I just want us to get through as much as we can. So stretch, stretch, and then sit down. Exhale. Okay. Fantastic. All right, so my panelists, when you're ready, please come up. Don't wait. All right. Okay, can we settle? Can we sit down? Okay, I'm sure you've got your energy back. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so a big hand for Carol as well. I think she did great work managing that last panel. My name is Peter Ndoro. My job is to take us through this last session before we read out what do we call it? The Summit Declaration. That's what we're going to do, the very last act. But before that, sorry, if there's someone talking to you next to you, please start ignoring them now. Okay. All right. Excellent. Now, this is actually probably part of the most important of the conversation that we've been having so far. We've done the journey. We know what the issues are. We know where the problems are. And I think everybody kind of agrees, you know, maybe what does racism look like? What does it feel like? How is it manifesting? How is it playing out? Next layer, I guess, is we've agreed that we've got to do something about it. You know, we've got to change this behavior, change these problems, change these challenges. And I guess a charter is a vehicle that can help us along that journey. Partly because it gives us a point of agreement, perhaps help us define the problem so that we can all see what is the basic minimum of what we would like to see. I'm always reminded of the Freedom Charter that was adopted here in South Africa, and people rallied behind this document because it was clear the world that people wanted to live in. What did it look like? And that's what the Freedom Charter was. And then everybody just suddenly went into action, knowing exactly where they wanted to end up in the future. So this charter that you're going to see today is a presentation to you so that you can use it to start your journey and your movement forward. We'll have many discussions, many deliberations going forward, and in your various countries and areas, you'll have an opportunity to look at it and tweak it and do what you need to do with it. But at least we'll start with what we feel it should look like. And I guess one of the big conversations we need to have now is, we know what the problems are, we know we need to change, we need to teach, we need to advocate, we need to educate, all of those things. what do we do now, especially around sanctions, around enforcing rules that exist? Well, I'm hoping that my panel is ready. If they can come up, gents, please come forward. Are you still being dressed up? All right, okay. So I have a panel of three that are going to help us start this conversation, but I can see that there's a lot of energy on the floor, and I don't want to run away from that. So I'm going to ask them to speak very briefly, just to lay the beds of thought, and then as soon as that's done, we'll get a conversation running with you as well. So let's not revisit the things that we've talked about already. We're talking about a document, a charter that can help us move forward. So let's chat a little bit about perhaps what you've seen in the charter, what things we can add, what value there is there, how we can use this charter as an enabling document. Let's have that conversation, because I think we've really kind of had an opportunity to exhaust some of the other issues that we know already. So we have a very distinguished group. Don't worry, guys, I will stand. So we'll put... Okay. There we go. There's another chair there. There we go. All right, so, ladies and gentlemen, a lot of these faces you will know, and some right now are going to speak more than the others, but I want to get comments from all of you anyway at some point. But former head of state and president of South Africa, His Excellency Kgalema Motlanthe, great to have you again. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big welcome to him. And actually why we brought him up onto the stage is that right as soon as we finish this conversation, they're going to present something about the Charter itself after a lot of the comments that you'll hear from our panelists now. And you'll see in the middle there, Mr. Gideon Sam as well from SASCOC, President. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. A very warm welcome to you. So they'll be doing their presentation. Yes, let's welcome him. But I suppose kind of leading this particular conversation, it's my great pleasure to welcome, starting here, the Director of Communications and Public Affairs for the Union of European Football Associations, UEFA. If you didn't know what UEFA stood for, there you go. William Gaillard, thank you. Bienvenue, merci beaucoup. Next to you, somebody who has lived and been sport his entire career, good sportsman in his day, and certainly also in leadership, the Vice President of FINA and IOC member, Dr. Sam Ramasamy. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us. And on your far side there, you'll meet a man who's the chairperson, he's the... well, I have it here. Ambassador for Djibouti to the permanent representative at the United Nations, but also very importantly, I think, his contribution that will be very valuable here is the chair of the Intergovernmental Working Group on the effective implementation of the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action 2001. I can see a lot of young people here who were probably still playing hopscotch at the time when that declaration was done. But it was a very, very important gathering, a conversation around racism that happened in Durban. And I would like to find out from him what's happened since. I guess in many ways it was a charter in itself. So we've got this opportunity to learn and also decide what we're going to do with our conversation here today. All right, so those are the people that are sitting on the panel that are going to help us discuss this. And please, you're very much a part of this conversation. And let's focus on the Charter, this document that we're presenting to you, which you've had a chance to read. And what do we do with it? How do we move forward? What can we add? How can it be a living document so that the Fordyces of this world can say, wow, you know, we did a powerful thing in Johannesburg in 2014. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me start with you, Ambassador Mohamed Siad Douale. Thank you very much for joining us. Your thoughts in 2 minutes, starting now.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I think it would be most appropriate for me to thank the organizers and for also congratulate them for the strategic partnership that they built to be able to move the global initiative. As you rightly pointed out, it all started here in South Africa, Durban, in 2001. The world community gathered to adopt what many, or the international community, recognizes as the most comprehensive blueprint in the fight against racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. What has been happening since? That was your question, and let me respond to it very quickly. We did the review in 2009 when we saw the resurgence of racism everywhere in the world, and the review pointed out that there was a need to try and fill the implementation gap, as rightly pointed out by many of the speakers yesterday and today. So I think the High Commissioner, Madam Navi Pillay, to whom I'd like to pay tribute here, played a very important role in also helping us achieve the outcome that we did achieve in 2009. In 2011, we also decided, because of the same implementation problems and what was perceived as the lack of political will at the global level, we decided, while commemorating the 10th anniversary of the DDPA, to mobilize political will at the global level. And I think President Jacob Zuma participated in the high-level event that was held in New York in September 2011. And that meeting adopted a very important document, which is called the Political Declaration. Two to 3 days ago, another important move was taken by the international community when we adopted the program of activities for the decade for people of African descent with the theme Recognition, Justice, and Development, starting from January 1st, 2015, and going up until 31st December 2024. So the context of the global anti-racism agenda is positive, and global initiative is also most opportune. The timing is perfect for me. Now, what does the Intergovernmental Working Group do in the UN? It makes sure that the recommendations of the provisions of the DDPA, the outcome document, and the political declaration are effectively implemented. How do we do that? It's a member states-driven process, with member states reviewing progress, sharing experiences, and also adopting recommendations that would help move the process further. NGOs, the private sector, are also welcome to participate, and I'd like to say here that the first time that the world heard about the global initiative, it's when we invited our brother Tokyo Sakawale. He had an opportunity to interact with member states and shared whatever he had to say about the global initiative. We also had this working group has dedicated a lot of time and attention on sport and racism, and we held so many high-level events on racism. And I just very briefly, I'd like to say that it's the most reprehensible, morally, politically risky endeavor to be a racist today. And I think the global call for action that we are now attending is most welcome. It will help us destroy whatever attempts are made to commodify, objectify, and dehumanize human beings, particularly in sport. Because many of the sports people that we heard thought that sport would be a heaven, a safe haven, a space where racism would be suspended, they would be valued and respected as sportsmen. And what did they find out? That the same problems continue. So what is the option now? Do you remain silent because of the sponsorship that you have, as mentioned in the analysis that Tokyo provided to the audience yesterday? Or you decide to take a stand? And I think the answer is clear. We should all take a stand. And that's about, we have an opportunity now to link up and establish possible synergies at the global level. A word now about the global barometer. I think this is also a wonderful initiative. It will, I hope it will produce reliable data based on scholarly inquiry. And this will be very, very useful for policymakers. How do we, it's a global initiative, so it would need a global buy-in. So many outreach activities should be held. The findings and the insights that you have to offer to the world should also be publicized, further. So that's what I have to say. I hope it wasn't too long.
All right, so I'm going to say thank you very much indeed. Yes, please be generous with your applause. But we're going to find out in a short while. Yes, we'll have vehicles such as the barometer, but so what? What will they do? And how will they have value without that? I'm going to skip you, with your permission, because I know we're going to hear from you in a short while. But if I could turn to you, Dr. Sam, your thoughts, especially as we now start to think about taking action and forcing some kind of change in behavior. How do we move forward?
Thank you, Peter. Before that, let me just read something. Many aspects and many elements were read from and about Chief Albert Luthuli and from Nelson Mandela. Let me read this part from Albert Luthuli. Do not deceive yourself into thinking that racialism is just another tyranny, like political tyranny or religious tyranny. I know many men who have changed their religion and many who have changed their politics. But I know of no man who has ever changed his race, and that is the way to Armageddon. For racialism is the only absolute tyranny. So I think that is what we need to fight against. That is a tyranny. Now, coming back to action, I know, of course, we've been philosophizing to a large extent up to now, and we talked about very elements, how we can confront it. But what I've heard has been a process. But what I would like is action, and as you rightly said, immediate action. Now, during this interval, I talked to Abdul Minty, and Abdul and I were deeply involved in the overseas campaign against apartheid sport. And what we used to do, we used to use the public support. We had demonstrations. We had demonstrations in very many parts of the world, in the United Kingdom. For instance, in 1970, Peter Hain, again, who was now a Labour MP, and of course he was a minister in the Labour government for many years, he started this movement against apartheid sport, and it was called the 70s tour. He was going to stop the 70s tour, and there were widespread demonstrations. Before that, the administrators didn't listen to the calls. The sports administrators didn't listen to the calls. And after these widespread demonstrations, everybody started listening to it. Everybody got to know what it was all about. And Abdul and I were deeply involved in that particular process. And out of these major demonstrations, many governments started taking action. I give you a very good example. In 1996, there were demonstrations in South Africa against the introduction of Afrikaans in schools. And we all know about those massive demonstrations that took place in Soweto and other areas. And immediately thereafter, very many African countries, together with other countries like Guyana and other countries, they withdrew from the Olympic Games in Montreal. No one expected that. But after that, the governments got involved. Only after that, 2 years after that, we got what was called the Gleneagles Agreement. The government started taking action. So this is what I believe we need to do now. We can take mass action. What we call, of course, in the United Nations, now they call it civil society. Before that, we used to call it NGOs, we used to call it pressure groups, and some used to call it special interest group. Of course, all that is now been encompassed into civil society. I believe civil society, we are here, we can take immediate action. We can start demonstrations, and those demonstrations will educate the people. That's what we want. We want education. How do we educate the people? And that is one of the ways, in fact, in my view, it might be the only way how we can change mindset. And we've had this. For instance, I give you good examples in just before the release of Nelson Mandela and political prisoners in 1990 in this country here. We were working from outside the country. There were demonstrations here against the cricket tour, the rebel cricket tour in South Africa. And there were widespread demonstrations. And of course, only after that did the white sports administrators realize, yes, we need to do something. Before that, they did nothing, absolutely nothing. To some extent, we got so many people in the country involved. And this was about cricket. And many of these demonstrators, they haven't even been to a cricket match. They've been to football matches. And in football matches, as you know, you have the main match, and before that you have the curtain raisers. But they didn't realize that there were no curtain raisers in cricket matches. And the demonstrations that took place, and the demonstrators said, not only are we going to demonstrate and damage the main matches, we're also going to damage the curtain raisers. They didn't realize that there were no curtain raisers in cricket. But nevertheless, everybody harnessed themselves around this particular issue. So boycotts helped. Boycott helped in very many ways for governments to do it. For instance, Mrs. Thatcher in 1986 made a devastating statement that she is not going to impose sanctions against South Africa. And immediately, the Nigerian foreign minister said, okay, if that is the case, we are nationalizing BP. So at the moment, there's no BP, of course, been nationalized since then. And then all the African countries and the Caribbean countries, including Cyprus, they withdrew from the Commonwealth Games in Edinburgh. It was a damaging effect. After that, everybody realized, and that was an educational process. Immediately, they got into action to do something. So I believe we can do that now. We can start here. In fact, we can educate very many of those races who are at administrative level, at playing level, to show them that this is not the way to go. And they themselves will realize that there is a guilty, because we are going to highlight them in a rather subtle way. And it has been done. So I believe I'm going to stop there now, because I know you've got the other issues. But we need to take action right now. Process is important, but process, again, is a long-term effect. We want action now, and action is something we need to demonstrate now. Thank you, Peter.
Dr. Sam, thank you very much indeed. And I think you spoke to a lot of what we've heard earlier as well, in terms of changing mindsets and helping with the education process. I think John Barnes talked a little bit about that as well. But I guess we kind of need to prod a little further than just educating, isn't it? Because there are some people who know what they're doing, and they do it regardless. And so I'm going to turn to you, Mr. Gaillard, UEFA, and unfortunately, because you're so successful with some of the best leagues in football, in sharp focus now with television, we see a lot happening in football now. But you've started to take action, and I want you to speak also a little bit about all these sporting codes, associations have rules, but they don't always apply them. Is it because there's a commercial imperative? What is it that we need to get out of the way so that those rules can be enforced?
Well, we went through a long apprenticeship. It's been over 15 years since we started to implement measures against discrimination and racism. And it was a slow learning process. I mean, we started with the fines, 2,000 euros there and 5,000 euros on the other side. And basically, this kind of measure we discovered didn't bite. It effected no change. Now, in the last few years, we've had competitions, we've had problems, and we've had sanctions, real sanctions. I was a bit dismayed myself when I saw the last World Cup in Brazil, where there were plenty of offenses against issues concerning many people, racism, discrimination, and so on, especially in the stands, but no sanctions, none whatsoever. So I came to believe that all these people who went around and said, give the red card to racism, no to racism, and so on, this was empty talk. There was absolutely no action after that. We've taken action over the last few years. We have sharpened our sanctions. They bite. They cost a lot of money to the offenders. We have closed stadiums. We have expelled clubs. We are banning athletes. These are sanctions that cost millions to the offenders. That's the only language that most people will understand. When I look at the draft charter, I believe that in order for it to bite, in order for it not to be the kind of document that all governments will say, oh, this is wonderful, we sign, then we go home and we change nothing. It needs some teeth. It needs to be more precise. What we're talking about when we say racism and discrimination is, of course, the racism that everyone talks about, the black-white issue and all the related phenomena. But it's also sexism, and we had many people talking about gender issues. Ms. Gaza was very clear. She gave us an excellent list. It's xenophobia, it's anti-Semitism, it's Islamophobia, it is discrimination based on sexual orientation. Now you have countries that will tell you that, oh no, there's no racism, but there is death penalty against homosexuals. But that's not racism. You get plenty of people who say, oh, I'm not a racist, I just don't like this category of people. So we need a charter that is very precise in what we're going to fight and what are the kind of issues on which we're going to sanction people. When we talk about, yeah, just one last issue. We talk about the barometer. It's an interesting tool. But I'm afraid if we leave it in the hands of government and self-evaluation, we'll end up having the most democratic, the most open governments in the world pointing out to deficiencies in their own societies, and the most closed governments in the world telling us that everything is fine. So we need a barometer that would be under the advice of civil society, that is under the advice of NGOs, that would send independent observers in each country and write a report. Some people won't like it, but they are exactly the kind of people that we want to sanction.
Okay. So teeth is your big word, talking forward. So a big hand for him. Lee, thank you very much indeed. I know that the two of you are going to present something in a short while, but I just want to get a very quick comment from you as well. President Motlanthe, I think one of the things that we're forgetting in this whole conversation is that the United Nations has described racism as a crime against humanity. You know, this is not just bad behavior. We could do better. This is a crime, and criminals get punished. How do you think, just your gut feeling, how can maybe a document like this, or how do we change it so that it's so serious in our minds that we appreciate the criminality of racism?
Well, thanks, Peter. I think for starters, what we need to do is to ask a pertinent question about this excerpt from Nelson Mandela that has been quoted by a number of speakers, and which says in part that sport is more powerful than government in breaking down the racial barriers. Now, we need to ask the question, where precisely does this power lie in sport? Where? Because the answer to that question will then indicate to us what we should do with this draft global charter, because it's a voluntary document, and if it is to have universal application, it must then land where this power that Madiba refers to in this excerpt resort. Where precisely does it resort? And to answer that question, I think we should ask the co-chair of Global Watch, Mr. Skhwale, or rather not him, because he did confess last night that he's not quite technologically up to scratch. So we'll ask Mahomet, please load the slide with the stadium. It's Global Watch slide. This slide, you see, refers to recognizing all the points that were raised by various speakers, that racism is a societal issue. It doesn't, begin in the sports field, as it were, but it begins in society and finds expression in the sport field. Now,
loaded.
Among the key structures that we learned about yesterday is that there are players on the field. And then there are teams to which these players belong. And Professor Ndebele summed up this issue so eloquently that each team is a system of rules, and that each association, each league, is a system of aspirations. So we aspire here through Global Watch to the creation of sport that would not be in any way tarnished by acts of racism or discrimination or related intolerances. Now, in order to get there, you see, this charter then serves as a roadmap. The goal is very clear. And of course, football is a philosophy of life. That is why games are won by scoring goals. So we also have a goal, and the goal is to have a sport that is free, completely free of any form of racism and discrimination, as well as related intolerances. So you have teams, you have owners, you have players, you have coaches, and you have associations, as well as sponsors and game officials. I think what we need to do is to rely on existing associations and make sure that we channel this charter to these existing associations. Because you see, the United Nations has numerous bodies that deal with racism, that deal with discrimination. The Human Rights Commission, Judge Pillay is here with us, will confirm this. And so if Global Watch is to have an impact, it must be strategically located within these sporting organizations, the associations in particular, be it the players, forums, or the number of teams that participate in these games, and all the associations. Those are the existing structure that we should utilize. As Dr. Sam Ramsamy says, we need to act now, and the best way to act now is through these associations. Because if we try to hang this on existing government programs, it will suffer the same fate as the outcomes of the 2001 World Conference Against Racism, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerances. That conference, by the way, gave us a very important lesson. And the lesson was that no human being can fully be defined by one attribute. No human being can be fully defined by one attribute, be it skin color, size of your nose, your height, the color of your hair. None of these can fully define you as a human being. Right. And so taking that lesson forward in sport, I think it's very important to have focus.
Right.
Yes, because as John Barnes so eloquently described, conscious as well as unconscious racism. We have got to steer clear of trying to do what we normally do in South Africa. We are very good at trying to warm the oceans at once. It's better to warm the water pot by pot or bucket by bucket. It's much better.
Okay.
So if we focus the process of ensuring that we give life to this charter by ensuring that it is with immediate effect located within these associations. And my colleague here, Gideon Sam, can, with immediate effect, ensure that all these sporting codes in South Africa come together to look at this. Because it needs to be taken to the remotest corners of South Africa.
Sure.
We can't leave this in the hands of the Department of Basic Education in order for it to reach young people. It must reach young people through the sporting codes.
Okay, well, talking of sport, yeah?
Yes, so I thought that's how to give this charter some teeth, because then it will be finessed, it will be fine-tuned out of the practical implementation. Because remember, it's not just a matter of good English and formulations, but it's the implementation. What impact does it have? Because sport, as Madiba says, has that power. And if we succeed to give effect to this charter, I think many nations as well as governments can learn a lot in terms of how to combat racism and related discriminatory practices.
All right, I want to thank you and just ask for applause for you. And I was going to get a quick comment from you, Mr. Sam. We're talking about associations. And again, I keep coming back to the idea that you know what the rules are. When people use drugs, you punish them and you don't mess around. They're out. Racism seems to have a slow burn effect or something, or we just don't deal with it with the same energy. In other words, we're not enforcing our own rules. Why is that? And what can we do with our associations, do you think, to say we're going to take a serious stance with drugs, with racism?
Thanks, Peter. I'm sitting here and my biggest problem is that, as South Africans, we've got short memories. We constantly go and talk about the same thing that we spoke about 10 years ago or 5 years ago. I was part of this conference in Durban. We came on horseback, on bicycles, to go to the United Nations and to listen as to what they want to tell us. And if you just analyze the road that we have traversed to be where we are now, you will see that we are neglecting the structures that actually brought us here. A big problem that we have in sport now is that even if we try to put the structures on the ground, we battle. Let me take you straight from Dr. Sam Ramsamy. Out in the world, he's anchored in the structures from Umtata to Cape Town to Kimberley in this country. He talks from London. He gives us the marching order from London. He says, I've just been to this meeting and I'm giving you the structure now. This is what is happening. We go back and we go back into the rural areas. If you think about it, even on the other side of Umtata, they understood what SACCOS is all about. They understood what non-racial sport is all about. And they did not, most of our sports people did not participate in what the homelands were instructing us to do, because we got the instruction from here. In the absence of structures, you will achieve nothing. We are here today as the sports movement, SASCOC, to take our marching orders from that leader called Tokyo Sekwale. And we are saying here, we are not going to listen to all the others. We are the sports movement called SASCOC. And as Comrade Motlanthe rightly says, it is now going to go from province to district into the municipalities. Now, when you ask me why we don't act, tell me what happened in 1985.
You could not even hit your sister in a street. And everybody in that street or area would know about it, and they will visit you and say, why do you assault women? What happened to those structures? Because for us to be the watchdogs, we must be on the ground. Now, this morning, and in a radio interview, the guy said, okay, go on with your things. You always do it on Joburg only. And it's true. You know, we discuss these things and we go nicely home. I'm saying to you that what you're asking me and the problem that we are encountering is that we do not have the strong structures. Why do we get so much flack from AfriForum? We say that that netball player will not do A, B, C, and D. Who goes to court with us? AfriForum. And then what do? We say, our structures are not strong enough, let's leave them. That is the challenge. And the sooner we get our structures up and running, I can tell you now, go to Soweto now. The Soweto Sports Council was the strongest council in here. You couldn't do anything about sport. And now everybody says, we have arrived. We've got freedom. Everything is honky-dory. It's not honky-dory. And that's why we're here. And we're going to take our instruction from our commander there, Tokyo, and he's going to say, this is what is going to happen. And we will go out and we will talk exactly what you're asking us to do.
All right. Okay. So this is a few opening thoughts. A big hand for him. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so you've heard their thoughts, and I just want to get a few questions here, because time really isn't on our side. I haven't heard a few questions from that side. If you've got a microphone in your hand, put your hands up, and if you've got a microphone in your hand, let's start from this side. And maybe what we can do is, please, if you could be as brief as possible, because I know you've got a lot you want to say, but time has got its limits as well. So brief statement, and then we'll collect 3, and then we'll get some responses from our panel. Okay, let's go.
I will be brief, Mr. Peter.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I commend all the efforts, and I don't tend to criticize anything. My name is Khalid Gassami. I'm Doctor of Laws at the University of South Africa. I am Palestinian originally, and I can tell you stories about racism and discrimination experience. Systems very hostile, including South Africa, Mr. President Khalima Motlanthe. Now Kimzanzi. So the system is not hostile anymore, but my brothers out there, the system is very hostile. I represent them on a daily basis in the Department of Home Affairs. But here I want to tell you a student of mine wants to write a dissertation about human rights and non-discrimination. I tell him or her, by the way, him or her only exclusive to South Africa, because we are non-sexist society. I start with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, the International Convention on Social and Political Rights, the International Convention against the non-discrimination against women. And then they tell me, but Prof, is it possible that we stop racism? I say, well, you know, racism is still going, and we are applying law positively. So we have a positivist approach to law and legal system. And then can we criminalize somebody in the court of law if he utters racist statements? I say, well, the First Amendment in America talks about harm and obscenity, and if it is not harmful, then, well, he can get away with it. In South Africa, yeah, of course, the limitation clause talks about imminent violence and hatred. So my question will be how we will draft a charter that is a little bit different from all those conventions that have teeth to change the playgrounds and actually to change the perspectives of the people about sport and about race and gender issue and disabilities. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Okay.
Chairperson.
Yes.
Chair, here am I.
Where?
Here am I here.
Okay, stand, speak.
No, this side, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Peter.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm going to say. I was supposed to have said it with the panel which was there before. But I want to know how much time are you going to give me?
25 seconds now.
5 seconds.
25
seconds. Peter, please.
Yes.
Please.
I'm saying
Peter,
please to
my
you as
name,
well.
let me come out with my name. My name is Jabulani Ketelo. I'm from the state. In the middle of the province which is in the middle of South Africa. That is, we've got only 2 states. It's United States of America and the Free State. So I'm from the Free State. Nobody could go anywhere without touching the Free State. Peter, I want to start from 19, as Mr. Samuel just said, from 96, 97, 98. There was a structure which was called National Sports Council. That was the structure which was preaching the same message, discrimination. Now today we are having the same structure that says away with discrimination and all that. Now, my question is one. 96 up to 98, that structure collapsed. And then the government took it to be his baby. And they were no more talking the same language that was talking at that time. Now here comes the Global Watch. If you want to stop discrimination in sports, please, the Global Watch, Mr. Tokyo, he must not be part of the government. The minute he becomes a part of the government, now there are policies that governs the government. Okay. You won't be able to talk the language that we're talking as they will be saying today. Okay. So, to stop that, please, Tokyo, don't go under arm of the government. Let the government.
All right. Do you know what? I know that you have a lot to say, but I think that we've got the gist.
Let the government,
We've got the gist of what you wanted to say. So I want to thank you for that contribution. And Mr. Sekhwale has nodded. And I've seen him nodding in affirmation, so he's going to disengage Global Watch from government on your behest.
Peter, okay. Yes, Danny here.
Yes.
And yes, Sam is there.
Yes.
We are all together in that structure, the National Sports Council.
Yes.
Nobody could cross South Africa without consulting Danny, without consulting NSC.
All right.
So let that be done. Then we'll be able to get rid of discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. From the Free State, thank you. And one very last comment. Who's got a microphone? Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Marcel Gascon from the Spanish News Agency, and I would like to ask to all the panel, you have talked about boycott and sanctions, but don't you think it's a bit contradictory to give the World Cup to 2 countries with real issues with human rights, like Russia and Qatar, and not only in football, but in politics also? It's not contradictory with the message of FIFA to fight against racism, homophobia, and other discrimination?
Okay, interesting question. All right, so I don't know which ones you want to pick up. I think one was a comment more than a statement, so that was fine. The other ones were, how do we draft this in a different way? And then how can we speak about enforcement and respecting rules if we're going to give countries that perhaps are not scoring high on human rights records these big events? So let's start with you, because you sit near that table.
I think there's been some very useful talk in the last few weeks, in particular coming from IOC, about the fact that among the conditions, the requirements for organizing a large world-size international sporting event, there should be a reference to human rights. I mean, right now we have references to transportation, hospitality, environmental sustainability. That's a new addition in the last 10 years. I think there should be one that says that the country should respect all fundamental human rights. And we can list them to make it more precise. But the fact is, it's nowhere. So we have no standards. We had a World Cup in 1978 in Argentina, at the worst time in the political history of that country.
How do we get around it, though? Because they're coming with tons of cash, and we have internal investigations that come out and say, no, everything was fine.
I think you've got a real issue. Yeah. You have to look at the whole process. Are these events, these events mean billions for entrepreneurs and other people. And therefore, it's obvious that people are ready to try to influence such a process. Okay, so one has to think really about overhauling the whole structure. We're talking about revolution here.
Okay. Anyone want to add, and because we don't have much time, I really want to address this. How do we draft this in a different form? How can it have a different voice so that it can actually do stuff?
There are several issues that have been raised by the audience, and largely, to some extent, it's a code of conduct. We don't necessarily have to go to regulations. And Gideon mentioned this issue about the structures. The structures worked with the code of conduct. They didn't have a constitution. And we have with us here Navi Pillay, who's highly qualified in explaining human rights issues. And of course, I listened to her many, many times. And the differing definitions we have. And of course, she's an expert in how she tried to overcome everything, but not possible to overcome everything. And that is the issue we have. But let me give you examples of the Olympic Games. In 1988, we held the Olympic Games in Seoul. And that particular time, it was a military government. And we forced certain issues to them. We couldn't force too many issues to them, but they changed. And that particular change now has brought what is called democracy in South Korea at the moment. It evolved during that period. And the very same thing happened in Beijing. There have been various forms of protest in Beijing. And we looked at it and we addressed it with the authorities. And of course, there have been dilution of certain issues that have happened in Beijing at the moment, to such an extent that many countries feel very much more comfortable now trading with Beijing. Not altogether comfortable, but they're much more comfortable now than they were in 2008. So it's an evolutionary process, and I think we have to understand that and accept that evolutionary process. And as I said, and the other issue with the IOC, now the major issue that is rising now is the issue of homophobia. We did not view it 20, 30 years ago. It has just come up now. And we're having a conference, the IOC is having a conference on the 8th and 9th of December in Monaco. And this issue about homophobia is going to be addressed. And any country that has discriminatory laws against homophobia will not be allowed to organize Olympic Games in the future. See, these are the types of action we take. So, some are blurry issues, how we can do it. Others are concrete. So we need to look at all those issues.
Okay. I mean, this is a conversation we can have for a long time. And unfortunately, we don't have a long time. And I guess this is a conversation you all are going to have to take forward, going forward. And I see the hands, and unlike in Parliament when we say, I'm going to mention you, it has a sanctioned value. Unfortunately, what I'm going to have to do now is kind of start to close this up. Thank you very much indeed for our panelists. But can I just ask Mr. Motlanthe just perhaps to say last words in terms of this charter? What are your thoughts as a way to take us forward? Just very briefly, and I know you spoke at great length, which was good, about taking it to the associations, but perhaps, yeah.
I don't think at this point in time, as the sports movement, we're saying that we want to walk away with a charter here. I think what it is saying to us is that here is a kind of an example or a guideline that you can use. So for us, it is clear that we first have to go and make sure that our people are in the know of what we're talking about as far as the Global Watch is concerned. Once they've got an understanding of that, they will then be able to engage what a charter is all about. But for now, I think as we sit here as a sports movement, I talk here with, here's my boss at the IOC and here in South Africa. So I'm saying that what we have now is a guideline for us to go forward. But we cannot go on for years. We need to come back to the commander and say that as far as the sports movement is concerned, we have accepted the marching orders and they are going to be like this. And that's at that point that we are going to need the support. Because if we say that it's going to be a demonstration, we can't have a situation where another structure in South Africa, like human rights, say, no, you're doing it wrong because we're all South Africans. And the gentleman from the Free State is correct. In all those structures, we have the right to stand up and say, that is not the right thing that we're doing.
Okay.
And that's what we want to do now. We are happy here. We've heard everybody speak. We're taking home to our own structures, the sports movement, and we're putting that in there. The charter we will study later. But for now, we're taking the points that we've received here, and we're taking that here.
President Motlanthe, your final thought, very briefly.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what Sam has said, because this needs to be implemented. All these ideas can only, be a factor that contributes towards the process of eliminating racism and discrimination in sport through sporting associations. Yeah.
All right. So I think we kind of got a consensus here. And on your behalf, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you very much indeed to our panelists and our guests that have joined us here. And if you could just please put your hands together for former President Kgalema Motlanthe, to William Gayard from UEFA, Dr. Sam Ramasamy, IOC member and Vice President of FINA, to Mr. Gideon Sam, thank you very much indeed, and to you also, Ambassador Mohammed Syed Dwale. I wish we had more time, but thank you very much indeed for your valuable contributions. Now, just before I let them go, I guess just to, when you look at the Charter itself, and I think you've had an opportunity to kind of go through it, at the end of the day, the preamble, that's self-explanatory, and it kind of helps us look at the rest of the document. Education, awareness, and advocacy. I think everybody agrees on this. We don't have to preach on this. We need to be doing that. That's a given. So we give that a big tick. Monitoring, analyzing, and prevention. Again, this is something we know that we need to do, and we've got the barometer that's on the horizon, that kind of thing. Again, nobody is disagreeing with that, so we can move forward with that. And I guess at the end of the day, advocacy we've talked about as well. A lot of just being here, actually, I guess, is advocacy in a way. A lot of the gatherings and the initiatives that we have, and speaking to the media and spreading the gospel, all of that is advocacy, and everybody agrees on that. And I think the one area that really kind of has come through that we need to start to engage more deeply, and as you go away with this presentation, this living document, the Charter, is this arena of sanction, about the rules, about you've got them. How do we make sure they get enforced? How do we make sure that a body that we belong to knows what the rules are, but actually does and take action? It's a crime against humanity. Now, if it's a crime against humanity, perhaps we need to take some people to the ICC to start to take this thing quite seriously, because it is that serious. It is as bad as that. So please go away, think about this Charter, this living document, as a vehicle for you to have further conversations, but understand that perhaps where we take action needs to be around a lot of these second parts where we're enforcing our own rules, and those that are not enforcing their own rules, how do we force them to make those rules real? All right, with that, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand for our panel as we say thank you very much indeed to them. Because what I would like to do as our panel find their seats is we've got an opportunity now to bring up a few people to share with us and read from the Global Summit Declaration that we're going to leave this session with. And to take us through that as our guests leave, thank you very much, Asante Sana. Please, could you put your hands together as we welcome onto the stage the UN Chief on Anti-Racism, Yuri Boychenko, Paralympic gold medalist, and also in able-bodied swimming, Natalie Dutoy. Thank you very much indeed. And also the Oprah Winfrey Leadership Academy for Girls. Please come up onto the stage and take us through the declaration. Thank you so much indeed. Okay, so... all right, you know what? There's a handheld somewhere. Who's got a sound team? Can I get one of these handheld mics that have been floating around? Where are these microphones that have been on the floor? There we go. All right. Okay. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from, I think, a great representation of people in the halls of power, people who've played the sport at the highest level, and the custodians of the future and the world that we want to live in, as they make this declaration that we will leave this summit with today. All right, so perhaps I can start with you, Mr. Boychenko.
No, I think it's Natalie.
Oh, is it Natalie starting? You're the leader of the PANC. Okay.
We, the participants, comprising representatives of civil society groups, activists, sportsmen and women, students, youth organizations, sports management bodies and administrators, political parties, states, United Nations, at the first Summit of Global Watch, say no to racism and discrimination in sport, held on the 20th to the 21st of November 2014 in Johannesburg, and following the launch of the Global Watch in Doha, Qatar in June 2014. United in our determination to combat the scourge of racism in sports and all spheres of human endeavor.
Taking note of the challenges posed to international peace, security and development by racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance, and concerned about the increasing incidence of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance in sport.
Recognizing the importance of sports as a powerful means to promote education, development, peace, and social inclusion, among others, and the huge potential of sport in providing a universal language to educate people on the values of respect, diversity, tolerance, and fairness as a means to confront racism and racial discrimination and promote inclusion.
Recalling the critical importance of civil society in the efforts to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance, as noted in the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action of 2001, the outcome document of the Durban Review Conference of 2009, and numerous resolutions of the United Nations, and taking note of the commencement of the International Decade for People of African Descent, celebrating the consensus reached by the UN member states and others on the adoption of first International Decade for People of African Descent.
In this regard, welcoming the establishment of Global Watch by the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Doha Goals Foundation, and the Sequale Foundation, and supporting the objectives outlined in the Global Charter.
Noting that Global Watch aims to mobilize sports people and millions of sports fans and other actors to create a global movement to strike a blow against racism in sports and in society, and calling on all to support and collaborate with the initiative with a view to combating all forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance.
Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, with that declaration, I think all that's left to say is, A, thank you very much indeed for being part of the deliberations. Most importantly, Don't walk out of here without a plan of action. Let's do little things in our areas and create little ripples. What I find is that if you start and just put that stone in the river or in the stream, ripples, 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 and they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the influence becomes more and more. So please take this charter, make it a part of your lives. It's a presentation to you. So it's not something that you're forced to do, but it's a guide. And it's a vehicle for a conversation to go and do great things. Start influencing people next to you. They'll influence people next to them. And before you know what's happening, we'll have the world that we want. But you can't leave it to the next guy. You have to do something. And let's start now. Let's make a difference. So thank you all very much indeed. Thank you for participating, and thank you for your contributions. And thank you very much indeed to you for presenting our declaration. Thank you all very much indeed, and go well, and may God speed. Good to see you again. How have you been keeping? Good, fantastic. And how has life been outside the court? Eh? Really? What are you up to now?